Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about ADD, ADHD, and autism. And we're going to be talking a little bit about just what I know, what I've researched, what I've experienced through these years. Some of you know that I had my 81st birthday in February. So when I look back on my years of studying this one topic, ADD, ADHD, and autism, I've actually been studying and researching this longer now than anyone I know. Most of the doctors that I speak to, psychiatrists, counselors, and so forth, they're not even that old. And so I'm often asked to sort of go back and do a reflection as well as what do I think now, 60 years into studying this subject? What do I believe and what do I see? Some of you do know I'm working on a book on ADD, ADHD, and autism, and I hope to be finished with it by the end of the year, maybe sooner. Um, Sometimes I'm asked, when did you start studying this? And I think it was sort of a afterthought, because when you don't have definitions and things have not yet been taught, they're very hard to research. So I started with how does nutrition affect behavior? Simply because of my own experience with a classroom, with certain classrooms that I was teaching way back in the late 60s. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have even a lot of books out there on nutrition and behavior. So I had to just go to the library and look and look and look. There wasn't a lot out there. But I was very privileged later, as we were just beginning to hear these definitions. In about 1970, 71, 72, somewhere along there, Dr. Fingal published a book on how dyes, colorings, additives, food preservatives affected ADD, ADHD, and autism, learning and behavior problems, as we were calling it at the time. Um, so we knew some of these things. We were beginning to suspect something was very wrong. Um, by the early 70s, we were getting labels. But I was observing two things, and these were important. Some of you know I taught high school English for a long time, and I purposely chose, after a few years, I chose to teach the classes who had struggling students. I really figured that those who were not struggling in school, if we handed them a set of encyclopedias, they could educate themselves. But what about those who wouldn't or couldn't? Now, my philosophy of teaching was different even then, because I had to look at a class and go, we have those who couldn't and wouldn't. So, how do you divide your students in those who won't and those who can't? And it wasn't long in each classroom to realize that some people just needed an attitude change, but others would have paid attention and learned if they could have paid attention and learned. So these were the students that I was especially interested in. I was trying to figure out what's wrong with their brain because I would notice certain things. Typically, you told the class to get out their pencils and paper, and everybody got out their pencils and paper. That's how you began the day. Um, but some students would be looking around the room trying to figure out what the other students were doing. Those were usually the couldn'ts. So, this is all this morning to talk about a bit about my pilgrimage and where I am today on this. As we began getting labels in the classroom, we also started getting medications. The thing that I noticed about the medications, these medications were not new to me. I'm from the 60s. I was in college in the 60s. We used amphetamines to study. Nobody thought they were harmful. You could get them like two for a quarter or a quarter each. I can't remember, from the drugstore right down the street. So we used them when we studied. You could stay up for 3 days and write a research paper, but it might be a jumbled mess. And you might not later be able to even remember what you had in that research paper. So when we started having students in the classroom who were being put on amphetamine so they could pay attention, they could pay attention. But were they actually learning? Because if I tested them a week or so later on the material, they did not know it. So I became opposed to the medicines. I was looking for something deeper. In the early 80s, I was very privileged to meet and become friends with a research pediatrician who was curious about what did I think was wrong. He asked me one day, Ms. Shepard, do you think these are new? These are better diagnostic tools, or do we have more students with ADD, ADHD, and autism? And I said, no, we have more. And he said, what do you think it is? And I said, I think there's something wrong with their minds. I just don't know what it is. And he said, that's what I think. And this began a wonderful few years of my life where I was learning from this incredible brain. But we were looking for the same thing. What's wrong with these kids? We knew something was wrong. He, like I, had decided we had more of the couldn'ts than the wouldn'ts. Now, I would have to say, for the most part in education at that time, most people thought it was their attitude. They thought their parents should discipline those students more. People in churches would say the same things. These kids have no parenting. I'm not going to discount parenting, schools, education, and the church in raising a child. What I am going to say is this: something was wrong in their minds. So that's why for these past years, I've been researching and studying what's wrong in their minds. As I began adding to just the actually a medical friendship with several other doctors, as we began to look in, what could we measure? What could we find out? We began to look for vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Quite often they have significant ones. We began to look also for something else. It was pretty much a new terminology: oxidative stress. The accumulation of damaging free radicals that are higher than the body's natural production of antioxidants can take care of. So this morning, I'm going to show you some research, because where am I after all of these years? I'm back to what I began learning in the 80s. The very root cause is brain inflammation, brain neuroinflammation, brain oxidative stress. I'm often asked, do I think it is genetic? There are some genetic components, but those components are not like a gene for autism, for example. They are mutations in genes that have been caused sometimes, and we're going to talk about a few of those causes this morning, but we're also going to talk about the great amount of hope that we have now. I'm going to share my screen with you to show you a little research this morning. Okay. Now, what I want to start with this morning is this one. If you're looking at my screen, you can see the role of oxidative stress and neuroinflammation in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. You'll notice that this is from the National Medical Library. This was not published until 2020, but there had been research coming out as far back as the 80s indicating that this was definitive in these conditions. However, there was not a medicine that could reduce the neuroinflammation, nor medicine that could reduce the oxidative stress. Now, when you have oxidative stress, you need an antioxidant. The body makes antioxidant enzymes. But during the 80s, 90s, there were so many antioxidants introduced. They were introduced in foods, they were drinks, they were all sorts of natural supplements and so forth. And they were designed, whether they were exotic juices or exotic tablets or combinations of vegetables and vegetables and fruit tablets, their job was to reduce oxidative stress. Well, oxidative stress can be measured in a blood test. So, in spite of all the antioxidants, in spite of all the supplements that the doctors prescribed and that the mothers scrambled around trying to find years and years ago, oxidative stress was not reduced in a blood test, nor did we see enough changes to justify uh, saying that antioxidants could help ADD, ADHD, and autism. You see where it might work in a test tube, where a molecule of an antioxidant could eliminate one free radical. It simply did not work that way in the human body. You couldn't get enough antioxidants into the body to actually lower oxidative stress with any significance. Instead, it was realized, what we need is something that it can enable the body to increase its production of the body's own antioxidant enzymes. So this article here is, you probably want to go back. Carol may put it in the chat box for us. This is a great article because it is clear in this article. They are very they talk about the medications. They talk about so much of what happens, but this is the paragraph that is so important because it mentions how the integrity of the neurons can be affected by oxidative stress, causing oxidative damage of neurons. Neurons that are rich in mitochondria. Uh, when the mitochondria is in the proper balance and working as the body needs it to, these things can help to prevent and seemingly correct neurodegenerative and psychiatric diseases. As you read through this article, you're going to find that the ADD is associated with oxidative stress, neuroinflammation, due to the imbalance between oxidants and antioxidants, as well as medications used for the treatment, genetic and environmental factors. And all of these things could be producing oxidative stress and neuroinflammation, which further increases the symptoms, triggering what? A vicious circle. And this is what I began seeing. I began going, wait a minute, these things are supposed to be helping these students, and they're actually seemingly not helping them. In fact, what was I seeing? I was seeing that there, with many of them, there seemingly was even more of an imbalance between the two hemispheres in the brain. The two hemispheres have to work together. If they don't work together, then we don't have a complete thinking process. So the inflammation in the brain seemingly began to make the imbalance in the two hemispheres worse. This article from PubMed is Reactive Oxidative Stress and Brain Diseases, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. As we read down here, you're going to see where it says a common denominator of all neuropsychiatric diseases, including schizophrenia and ADHD. We're looking at opposite ends of a spectrum as an increased inflammatory response of the brain, either by exposure to pro-inflammatory inflammatory agents during the development are an accumulation of degenerated neurons, oxidized proteins, glycated products, or lipid peroxidation in the adult brain. So you're going to be introduced here, if those of you are new on the program here. This article goes on to discuss the neuroprotective role of NRF2. And this one, it's in the aged brain, but this is, even as they say, the antioxidant therapy is a novel therapeutic strategy. And that's not just in the adult brain. It is also in the adult brain. This particular article, and we're not going to spend the whole morning on articles because I am going to let you, I'm just trying to teach you how to do some of your own research. This one is the role of oxidative stress and antioxidants in autism. This is an incredible study here. And they basically say that if you can find an antioxidant that will work to lower oxidative stress, you've probably unlocked the key. So a couple others here. This one, oxidative stress is a common key event in developmental neurotoxicity. With the developmental neurotoxicity, when we're looking at causes for autism, ADD, ADHD, we find that there are a lot of things. There are conditions that happen in the womb, conditions that happen after a child is born. We're going to come back to that. I'm just going to show you one or two other things. Look at this one, brain glutathione and GABA levels in autistic children. They are basically saying here, these things have roles to play. And this one, some of you, this is going to be brand new information to you. Paracetamol and acetaminophen in the developing brain. This is a very important article to read because we've actually given these kids gallons of Tylenol. We've given them so much. We were told, I suppose in the 70s, that not to use aspirin, not to use baby aspirin. There was a brand new medicine out over the counter that was going to solve all problems, and this was acetaminophen. So parents happily gave their children little dosages of cherry Tylenol, not realizing that they were shutting down the body's most important antioxidant that the body makes, which is glutathione. So if you have science, and I haven't even given you 10 out of thousands and thousands and thousands of scientific articles indicating that oxidative stress is at the very root of ADD, ADHD, and autism. Neuroinflammation. There's so much out there now. When I first started studying, we didn't, as I said, we didn't even have the internet. And so I was scrambling around. It wasn't until 2011 I had begun to say I think glutathione. I think there's a huge thing with glutathione in ADD, ADHD, and autism, because I was seeing kids get better because we were able to increase their body's production of glutathione. And then Dr. Martha Herbert, who is a leading doctor and scientist in this field at Harvard, made the statement that she believed that glutathione, the low production of glutathione, was the link to ADD, ADHD, and autism. So with that, even though we had suspected for really about 40 years that glutathione, we knew it was implicated, but was it the link? The oral glutathione didn't work well. The injections, the IVs were better, liposomal. All of these were putting glutathione into the body. What if we could get the body to make more glutathione? So as I have gone back, and in the first part of the book I'm working on, it is going to be on causes. Usually if I'm sitting with a mom, they want to know, what do I think caused it? And it is like putting the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together where you never got to see the picture. Some of the pieces fit together, and we have a lot more pieces that fit together now. The biggest one that I have seen is the lack of production of glutathione, oxidative stress, and neuroinflammation in the brain. So when I'm sitting with someone and they're like, I don't, I've tried this, this, and this. We've spent, these parents spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to help their children. And he's not getting any better. He's just like he was. I say, let's change the landscape of the body and the brain first. And what do I mean by that? I mean lowering oxidative stress. I mean increasing the production of glutathione. And how do we do this? One of the articles that I showed you this morning indicated that the way to do this is to activate the signaling pathway between damaged DNA, and trust me, these kids have damaged DNA, to the survival genes, so that this little communication pathway can be activated and their survival genes can do their job, which is to correct the damaged DNA. So with causes, what do I really think? Well, I think that quite often when mothers are carrying their babies, they they are they are trying their best. I would say most mothers do want to have healthy babies. Um, they can't always eat correctly, especially if they're having morning sickness. A lot of times they're taking medications during their pregnancies, and this can affect the developing child. Uh, if a mother has high oxidative stress, her baby's body is going to try to correct the oxidative stress. There's some very interesting studies on that. The other thing is that um, when a baby is born, well, when the baby is in the womb, the baby's developing all the time. You know that. And one of the things that's developing is the baby's ability to hear. They know that the baby in the womb can hear, and they know that the idea behind this is for the baby to be able to latch onto the mother's voice, the father's voice, whoever's in the household, little brother, big brother and sister, for the baby in the womb to hear those voices, and that those voices become familiar. We raise sheep and goats. We see this. We see this. Those babies are born knowing their mother's voice. Well, in the world in which we live, and in the world we've been in really in the last 40, 50 years, there are conflicting noises and voices all the time. The TV, the radio, the this, that, and the other. The constant cacophony of other voices makes it almost impossible for a baby to latch on to the voices it needs to latch on to. And then the other thing is the eyes. They know that the baby can see, I don't know how this happens, through the womb. So the propensity of electromagnetic fields and the prevalence of it right now contributes greatly, and may turn out to be one of the most definitive causes to the wiring of the brain incorrectly. Now, what does this mean? This means after the baby's born, especially, but they think now maybe even before the baby's born, the baby is watching. You've seen this. They say that a baby's smile, if it's not a bowel movement, it is a reflection of a person's smile to them. They watch, they watch, they watch, and then their cells actually learn how to do the action. They learn to have some sort of communication. Then later they learn to eat, they learn to walk. They learn to act like a human by watching. Now, would they develop completely in isolation? I think they would, these basic skills, because of instinct. But on the other hand, when you have a child, an infant, especially up, we thought it was to age 2. It's older than this now. If that child is placed in front of a screen, now don't think I'm picking sides here. Do your own research. Those children that are placed in front of a screen as a babysitter, I'm not condemning mothers, because heaven knows mothers need all the help they can get. Those children's brains are wired incorrectly. Now, what do I mean by this? University of Pittsburgh study way back 20, 30 years ago did a study where they put neuroscans on a group of children, infants to age 2. They had to stop the study because the infants' brains were being wired incorrectly. What does that mean? They were hearing all sorts of voices and noises. And we often would put a child in front of a cartoon character. The child's language development then was askew. And the other thing was, the brain doesn't learn virtually the same way it does with experience. And so instead of the baby having the important production of certain neurotransmitters by being held, by being rocked, by being talked to, so many children were just placed in front of the TV. Or now it's the cell phone. You've seen it. You've been in the grocery stores. You've seen these little 2-year-olds. They can hardly hold the phone. They are wiring these brains incorrectly. Is there anything we can do about it? And we're already out of time. Is there anything we can do about it? One, let's change the landscape of the body first. There are nutraceuticals that children and adults can take. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you have ADD, ADHD, and autism, we can help you, your body, change the production of these important antioxidant enzymes. What is that going to do? It's going to help your neurotransmitter. It's going to help the signals. You make serotonin in your gut, but you have a signal that releases the serotonin, for example, in the brain, or the acetylcholine, or the whatever, dopamine. So when it releases it into the brain, if that signal is not working, you're going to have a child that's filled with anxiety. You're going to have a child that cannot pay attention. So as we recreate and help the body have a better production of antioxidant enzymes, as soon as we see that we have got this done, we've got it where it's working, and most parents will be able to see this, then you can start your educational techniques. The brain with the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere can be trained. We talk about neuroplasticity. We talk about neurodiversity. We talk about how do we change the brain. The good news is it can be changed. The left hemisphere, the right hemisphere can, through therapies, be taught to work better together. I often here's the right side. It's more of this. With ADHD, it's more of this. It's everywhere. With autism, it's all over the place. What we want to do is, through correcting how the brain works, I'm not talking about the mind, I'm talking about the brain, to have the left and the right hemisphere having what it needs nutritionally, having what it needs with the enzymes, the hormones, everything that the body makes, to have these two hemispheres working together. Then we can work so much better with language development. We can work with all sorts of therapies, and they're out there. There's some excellent. I've been so excited with the development of what we can do to change the brain. I do think the earliest intervention, the better. I do think that, and the stats, we're not going to have time for the stats this morning, but things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. This is a disease that's been caused. Modern civilization, environmental toxins, electromagnetic fields, and really a lot of how this culture is developing. The culture is developing, baby put in baby carrier, that baby's not getting the production of oxytocin from being in a baby carrier. Baby is placed in front of the TV or in a shopping cart. So I often, when young people or we're talking to young people about marriage, I'm like, when you get ready for children, get ready for children, get your body ready, and then get your mindset. You have a very few years here to help this child develop the best mind possible. So make that child the priority during these years, not your own thing. Make the child that priority. I do believe that instead of all of these developmental disorders increasing, I think we can get them decreasing, but it's going to take an international change of thought. And it's going to take an international change of what we're feeding them, what we are allowing children to eat. And it's going to mean that lives have to be different. So if you want a child without ADD, ADHD, and autism, or if you know one right now, let's do what we can. Some things can be improved. Maybe they can't be 100% cured, but I think if you can eliminate any of these, even though I would love to start with eliminating the causes, we are where we are, 2024. By 2034, it's predicted that 1 out of 6 boys will be diagnosed with autism, not ADD, not ADHD, but autism. So I want to tell you that there's hope. There's great hope. But I believe when you ask me after 60 years, what do I think? I say, let's change the landscape of the body first. And then you're going to have great success with whatever therapies. But I would recommend a well-trained therapist, but you're going to have improvements, and don't give up. So, Carol, let's go to questions and answers.